December 7, 1869. Gallatin, Missouri. Banker John Sheets freezes behind his mahogany desk as Jesse James leans forward, 5 words hanging in the air like gunpowder. A leather satchel sits empty on the counter between them. 8 minutes ago, Jesse walked in wearing a Sunday suit, land deed in hand, asking politely for a $3,000 loan. Sheets recognized the face from wanted posters and said no. Now Jesse's Colt gleams in the winter light, streaming through frosted windows, and Sheets' hand trembles on the safe dial. Inside that vault, 17,000 in greenbacks, gold coins, and bonds. The world knows Jesse James as an outlaw, a Confederate guerrilla turned bank robber. What the world doesn't know is that this robbery, the one that made him a legend, started as a legitimate loan request. 5 words changed everything. By the time Jesse rides out of Gallatin, one man lies dead, one satchel bulges with a fortune, and American outlaw history pivots on what happens when dignity gets refused at gunpoint. By December 1869, Jesse Woodson James was 22 years old and trying to play farmer in Clay County, Missouri. The Civil War had been over for 4 years, but ex-Confederate guerrillas didn't get fresh starts. They got suspicion, rejection, and closed doors. Jesse had ridden with Quantrill's raiders from 1863 to 1865, burning Union towns and learning that violence solved problems faster than negotiation. Now he needed $3,000 to buy farmland outside Liberty, and banks treated former rebels like they carried smallpox. His mother Zerelda told him the truth over breakfast one cold morning. Legitimacy is a costume, Jesse. Some men never get to wear it. He had $14,000 in cash hidden in a leather satchel in the barn. Money from robberies nobody could prove he'd committed. But that money was survival. The land deal required clean money, a loan with his name on paper, proof he could walk through the front door like any other man. He chose Daviess County Savings Bank in Gallatin because the banker, John Sheets, had never met him face to face. Jesse figured anonymity bought him one chance at respectability. He was wrong. John Sheets controlled $60,000 in deposits and had rejected 8 loan requests from ex-Confederates that month alone. At 45, he ran his bank like a fortress. Safe combinations memorized, revolver in the desk drawer, trust extended to no one who'd worn gray. When the new wanted posters arrived in late November 1869, Sheets studied Jesse James' face carefully. High cheekbones, cold eyes, a mouth that didn't smile even in the sketch. $500 reward for information leading to capture. Sheets pinned the poster to the wall behind his desk, where customers couldn't see it, but he could glance up any time. The Daviess County Courthouse was 3 blocks away. The marshal's office, 2. Sheets had options if trouble walked through his door. On the morning of December 7th, frost covered the windows and cigar smoke hung in the air. A pendulum clock ticked behind the teller cage. 2 customers waited near the door, bundled in coats, breath visible. When the bell above the door rang and Jesse James stepped inside, Sheets knew immediately. The face matched. The calm in Jesse's eyes didn't. Fear makes men careful, and careful men keep secrets locked. But fear also makes men stupid. Jesse rode into Gallatin at 9 in the morning, the leather satchel strapped across his saddle, brass clasp catching the weak December sun. Inside, a land deed, a bank statement showing cash reserves and nothing else. The satchel looked empty because it was a farmer's bag, worn and ordinary. Jesse's Colt .45 stayed hidden under his coat. 3 blocks away, Frank James waited with 2 horses, reins loose, eyes scanning the street. The plan was simple. Ask politely, show credentials, accept the loan or accept rejection, and ride out. Violence was plan B. Jesse had done this before, the legitimate approach, and been turned away 6 times in 6 towns. But Gallatin didn't know his face. That bought him a chance. He dismounted, looped the reins, adjusted his hat. Church bells rang in the distance. Frozen mud cracked under his boots. Hoarse breath steamed in the cold air. He pushed open the bank door, removed his hat, and smiled at the 2 customers near the stove. Every negotiation starts with pretending you have options. By the time Jesse reached the banker's desk, he'd already decided how this ended if the answer was no. Jesse entered the bank calm, polite, hat in hand. Mr. Sheets, the banker looked up from his ledger, and for half a second, Jesse saw recognition flicker across the man's face. Sheets' eyes darted to the wall behind him. The wanted poster Jesse couldn't see but could sense. Jesse set the land deed on the desk. I'm here about a loan. $3,000. I have collateral and references. His voice was steady, conversational, the tone of a man who belonged. Sheets didn't move. His hand slid toward the desk drawer where the revolver waited, then stopped. The two customers near the stove turned to watch. Ink smell, wood creak, cold air leaking through window cracks. Jesse noticed Sheets glancing at the poster again. The ledger stayed open, but Jesse's name would never be written in it. Sheets leaned back, folded his arms. We don't serve your kind here. Not, we can't approve this loan, or your collateral isn't sufficient. Your kind. Rejection is a door, but humiliation is a match. Jesse's smile didn't change. His hand moved toward his coat, slow and deliberate, like reaching for a pocket watch. But it wasn't a watch he wanted. Jesse leaned forward, voice dropping to barely above a whisper, and said 5 words that turned everything. I wasn't asking your permission. The silence held for 3 seconds. The customers froze. Sheets' hand jerked toward the desk drawer. Jesse drew the Colt faster than Sheets could blink, barrel leveled at the banker's forehead. Open the safe. All of them. His tone stayed conversational, like he was still asking about a loan. Outside, Frank James saw the shift through the window and moved. He pushed through the door, locked it behind him, flipped the sign to closed, and drew his own revolver on the two customers. Floor, now! They dropped without argument. Jesse never took his eyes off Sheets. The Colt's barrel caught the winter light streaming through frosted glass. Sheets' hand shook as he reached for the safe dial. This was the moment, the tipping point where authority collapses and a man realizes he has no control left. Jesse James had killed men during the war. He'd robbed before, but until December 7th, 1869, he'd never killed during a robbery. That record was about to end, and both men in that room knew it. Sheets spun the dial. Click, rustle of bills. Heartbeat loud in the ears. The first safe swung open. Inside, $4,200 in greenbacks and bonds. Jesse pulled the leather satchel forward, brass clasp gleaming. Keep going. If you're hooked now, wait, it gets crazier. Over the next 6 minutes, Jesse directed Sheets through 3 more safes with surgical precision. Each click of the dial, each swing of the iron door, each stack of bills and pile of gold coins went into the satchel. Greenbacks, bonds, silver certificates, double eagles that clinked like church bells. Frank kept the revolver trained on the two customers, who lay flat, faces pressed to the cold floor. Nobody spoke. The only sounds, paper rustle, metallic clink, Sheets' ragged breathing. Jesse moved behind the desk, rifled through drawers, found the land deed application Sheets had rejected. He pocketed it. The satchel bulged now, brass clasp straining against $17,000. More than 5 times what Jesse had asked to borrow. He left $200 in the smallest safe, laid neatly on the bottom. For your trouble, Jesse said. It wasn't kindness. Mercy is a message, not compassion. It says, I could have taken everything. I chose not to. Remember that. Jesse backed toward the door, satchel slung over his shoulder, Colt still trained on Sheets. Frank moved first, stepping outside, scanning the street. The two customers stayed frozen on the floor, eyes wide, memorizing every detail they'd tell the marshal later. Jesse tipped his hat to Sheets. You could have just said yes. Then he stepped through the door into the freezing Missouri morning, mounted his horse, and secured the satchel to the saddle with leather straps. 3 blocks to the edge of town. Frank rode beside him, calm, scanning rooftops. For 5 seconds, it looked like a clean escape. Then Sheets grabbed the revolver from his desk and fired through the shattered window. The shot missed Jesse by inches, shattering ice on a hitching post. Jesse wheeled his horse and everything slowed. Sheets stood in the broken window frame, revolver smoking, face twisted with rage and humiliation. Jesse could have ridden, should have ridden, but something in that moment, the audacity of a man who'd refused a simple loan now trying to kill him, snapped the last thread of restraint. Jesse spurred his horse back toward the bank, drew the Colt, and fired once. John Sheets fell backward into the bank, dead before he hit the floor. Historical records confirm it. December 7th, 1869, Gallatin, Missouri. Banker John Sheets shot through the chest by Jesse James during a robbery that started as a loan request. Witnesses would later describe Jesse as polite until the shooting started, then cold as winter. Frank and Jesse spurred their horses and rode hard, the leather satchel bouncing against Jesse's saddle, blood already speckling the snow behind them. Gunsmoke hung in the air. Townspeople shouted from doorways. Church bells clanged an alarm. Jesse didn't look back. By the time they crossed into Clay County 3 hours later, the satchel's brass clasp was flecked with frost, and the leather darkened with sweat from the horse's flank. That night, Missouri's governor posted a $1,000 reward for Jesse James, dead or alive. The difference between robbery and legend is what happens after. Jesse had crossed that line in 8 minutes. If you think that's where the story ends, you're wrong. What happens next is the part nobody talks about. By January 1870, Jesse and Frank divided the $17,000 in a barn outside Liberty. Jesse's share, $8,500. The first thing he did? He bought the land he'd asked for the loan to purchase. $3,000 cash, deed signed Jesse W. James in clean ink. The public never knew. Newspapers screamed about the Gallatin robbery, the murder of John Sheets, the hunt for the James brothers. What they missed was the darker truth. Jesse had tried to do it the legal way first. He'd walked into that bank as a customer, not a criminal. Sheets forced his hand. The leather satchel sat in the barn now, bloodstain visible on the bottom corner where it had rested against the saddle after the shooting. Jesse hung it on a nail, didn't clean it, didn't hide it. Zerelda saw it one morning and asked what happened. Jesse looked at her, voice flat. I asked first. They made me a criminal. Violence is what remains when dignity is refused. By February 1870, Alan Pinkerton was hired to hunt Jesse James. The detective was smart, methodical, and obsessed with patterns. He started interviewing witnesses in Gallatin, and what he found didn't match the legend. One witness, a clerk at the general store across from the bank, remembered Jesse entering the bank in a suit, no gun visible, smiling. That detail haunted Pinkerton because it suggested something newspapers refused to print. Jesse James might have been telling the truth about wanting a loan. Pinkerton discovered Jesse had entered Daviess County Savings Bank unarmed initially, or at least without his weapon drawn. Witnesses confirmed Jesse wore a suit, carried a land deed, and spoke politely to Sheets before the violence erupted. The detective built a theory. Either Jesse planned the robbery from the start and played the role perfectly, or something in that interaction flipped a switch. Between 1870 and 1871, Jesse robbed 5 more banks across Missouri and Kentucky, and Pinkerton found the pattern. Every robbery followed the same structure. Jesse walked in calm, made a request or asked a question, got refused or recognized, then drew his weapon. He always started polite. He always ended brutal. Pinkerton filled a notebook with observations, sketches, timelines. One entry, dated June 1871, read, "Starts as customer, ends as killer." The leather satchel appears in 3 robberies, brass clasp, worn straps. Witnesses describe it consistently. He's not hiding. He wants to be seen. The satchel had become Jesse's signature, a recurring object that witnesses recognized across state lines. Pinkerton sat in his St. Louis hotel room one night, whiskey glass sweating on the table, map of Missouri spread across the bed, and realized something. Jesse's rage wasn't random. It was precise, targeted at institutions that represented the same rejection he'd faced in Gallatin. Banks that wouldn't lend to ex-Confederates. Patterns are how legends become predictable. Pinkerton decided to set a trap. June 1871, Columbia, Missouri. Pinkerton arranged for an undercover agent to pose as a banker at Boone County Savings. Word spread quietly through ex-Confederate networks. New bank, sympathetic to former soldiers, willing to lend. Jesse took the bait. He rode into Columbia on a Tuesday afternoon, leather satchel under his arm, same routine. He walked into the bank, approached the counter, and requested a $500 loan for equipment. The agent, playing his role perfectly, hemmed, checked paperwork, then shook his head. "I'm sorry, we can't approve this." Jesse smiled. His hand moved toward his coat. But something was off. A shadow moved wrong in the back room. Sunlight caught the edge of a rifle barrel. Jesse's instincts, honed through 6 years of guerrilla warfare and a dozen close calls, screamed danger. He didn't draw. He backed toward the door, still smiling, and said, "My mistake." Then he ran. Pinkerton burst from the back room 2 seconds too late, revolver drawn, shouting for Jesse to stop. But Jesse was already on his horse, spurring hard, the satchel left behind on the bank counter in his rush. Pinkerton picked it up, turned it over in his hands. Leather worn smooth, brass clasp tarnished. Inside, the original Gallatin land deed and a dark stain that could only be blood. The things we carry expose what we can't let go. Pinkerton examined the satchel like a relic, understanding finally that Jesse hadn't just robbed Gallatin. He'd killed for the right to own land legally. The blood stain was John Sheets. The land deed was Jesse's proof of original intent. This wasn't a Robin Hood stealing from the rich. This was a man who'd asked permission, been humiliated, and decided humiliation justified murder. Pinkerton never caught Jesse James. That failure haunted him until Jesse's death in 1882, 11 years later. But in June 1871, holding that satchel in a Columbia bank, Pinkerton realized he was chasing something more dangerous than a criminal. He was chasing a symbol of what happened when a society refused redemption to men it had turned into killers. Jesse, for his part, changed tactics after Columbia. No more polite requests, no more playing customer. He went straight to robbery, hard and fast, no pretense. The satchel he'd left behind became evidence, locked in a Pinkerton evidence room, forgotten by everyone except the detective who'd held it and understood its weight. Jesse commissioned a new satchel in 1876, identical brass clasp, same worn leather. But he buried the original at his mother's farm, wrapped in oilcloth, hidden like a confession he couldn't speak aloud. After 1871, Jesse James stopped asking for anything. He robbed trains, not banks, higher payouts, fewer witnesses, cleaner escapes. The leather satchel became legend. Witnesses across Missouri, Kentucky, and Iowa described it in wanted posters. Armed and dangerous, carries worn leather satchel with brass clasp. It was the one detail that never changed, the object that followed Jesse through a dozen robberies and made him recognizable even when his face was hidden. In 1875, Pinkerton agents raided the James family farm, threw an incendiary device through the window, and killed Jesse's 8-year-old half-brother in the explosion. Zerelda lost her arm in the blast. During the raid, agents dug up the yard looking for stolen money and found the original satchel, still wrapped in oilcloth, bloodstains still visible after 6 years. Pinkerton examined it again, this time with bitterness. Jesse had kept it like a trophy, or a wound that wouldn't heal. Jesse saw the raid as proof. They wanted the legend, not the man. He vanished after 1876, hiding in Tennessee under assumed names, and the satchel's legend grew larger than its owner. What you carry becomes what people remember, and Jesse carried that refusal everywhere, in leather, brass, and blood. April 3, 1882, St. Joseph, Missouri. Robert Ford shot Jesse James in the back, while Jesse straightened a picture on the wall. He was 34 years old. His estate included $3,200 in cash and the land deed from the Gallatin robbery, still in his name after 13 years. The original leather satchel was found in a barn behind the house. Bloodstain intact, brass clasp tarnished but still functional. Jesse's funeral drew 500 mourners. Newspapers called him the Robin Hood of the Ozarks, a hero who stole from the rich and gave to the poor. But bank ledgers told a different story. John Sheets could have approved Jesse's original loan request. The collateral was sufficient. The creditworthiness, marginal but acceptable. Sheets chose rejection. Jesse chose murder. The price of pride is paid in doors that never reopen. I wasn't asking your permission. 5 words that became an outlaw motto, repeated by Butch Cassidy, Billy the Kid, and a generation of men who decided dignity mattered more than law. The original satchel ended up in Chicago's History Museum in 1920, displayed behind glass with Jesse's Colt in the Gallatin land deed. In the 1950s, forensic analysts confirmed the bloodstain belonged to John Sheets' blood type. Museums framed Jesse as a folk hero. Historians knew better. He wasn't Robin Hood. He was a rejected customer who killed a banker and spent 13 years justifying it. The satchel's brass clasp still shines under museum lights. The bloodstain's still visible, dark against worn leather. What we refuse to give creates what we can't control. Every no spoken from safety teaches someone else what fear sounds like. The satchel proved it.